It's actually our primary. This is one of the balancings of COVID. We've been able to get away with this becoming our primary home.
Really? So today I'm joined by Keith Roy, who is a 17-year real estate veteran, works in the Vancouver market for Remax Select. Keith, welcome to the podcast.
I'm very, very disappointed I'm not with you in person.
Yeah, do you know what? Next time, I promise we will do it in person, which makes for a far better experience all round, I believe.
Both on the front and the back end of the interview.
Yeah, there you go, exactly. So Keith and I initially connected on Instagram, and I think, I can't remember if it was your comment, but you said, sometimes I see the price of housing came in and think that it's surprisingly cheap. What am I missing? And obviously the Vancouver market is expensive. So what was it that sort of surprised you about that?
Well, once you can afford to, I've realized over the years that once you can afford to live in Vancouver, you can kind of go anywhere in the world and nothing seems crazy. Even the small remote islands with their really expensive food and the cost of shipping goods, whether it's Hawaii or Cayman or Barbados, like everywhere I go in the world, I'm like, this seems reasonable. Because Vancouver has really skewed my perspective of what is reasonable and the normal price of things.
Yeah, I think we could probably connect on that. I mean, the disadvantage to living somewhere expensive is that it's expensive, but whenever you travel, stuff seems either relative or, more affordable.
It's even more pronounced coming from Canada, where we've maintained a low Canadian dollar policy for a number of years now. So when we go to the States, everything is 35% more expensive.
Yeah.
And even after that, I still look at prices of restaurants. I'm like, this makes sense.
Yeah, and actually that's true, particularly when Canadians that are relocating here to the Cayman Islands are selling their real estate there. The conversion rate really does impact their affordability down here, and recently it's not been in their favor. So I think a lot of people do find it quite expensive when they move down here. If they're obviously outside of the Vancouver market. Talk to me about the Vancouver current real estate market. What are you seeing, and how is activity there at the moment? So Vancouver is interesting in that it's Asia Pacific gateway, right? It's located a direct flight to most major Asian cities, or a quick stopover somewhere in Asia. The economy is driven in large part, quite frankly, by real estate. I've often said, if you took all the mountains and scraped them up and filled the ocean, you'd look like the prairies. You'd look like the Midwest. You'd have no reason to exist because we don't even have a railway that runs through the middle of it. We make beautiful memories and great scenery. We have a couple headquarters, mining headquarters for northern British Columbia and into the Northwest Territories, the far north of Canada, where there's a lot of resources in the ground, particularly now minerals, cobalt, nickel, things that are being used in electric car batteries. That's kind of Canada's going to be on the forefront of that, I suspect. So there's a bit of kind of the administration of that happens in Vancouver, but for the most part, real estate is what drives our economy. International capital, primarily from Asia, has been coming in since the Chinese takeover of Hong Kong in 95, I guess it was, when I was in high school. And that money is just here now. So that money just kind of lives in this economy. We don't have old money. We don't have a lot of old money in Vancouver. We don't have a lot of manufacturing or people who own, scions of industry. That's not who we are. We have international money that comes primarily from China. It's spent here into the local economy. Those families have now moved here. They might still own a factory in Beijing or Wuhan or Shanghai. The kids are going to school here. For a long time, China had the one-child policy, so a lot of the families moved here with their first child to have a second and third child here in Canada. But the money isn't made here. The money was made in China. The money was made somewhere else in the world, and it's spent and enjoyed here. And so that's flushed the economy with a lot of money, which has driven high housing, in addition to everything, high housing prices. And then the final piece of the puzzle from a real estate standpoint is the lack of land supply. So to the south, we have the American border.
We're about 3 hours north of Seattle. So we have the American border to the south, which is from Vancouver proper, it's about 45 kilometers to the border. So border to the south, ocean to the west, mountains to the east, mountains to the north. You're limited to a very small chunk of land. You would understand this in Cayman, that if you have a limited land supply and you control it, and governments control it so heavily what you can build on it, large portions of it, like 60 to 70%, are agricultural land reserve held for food production. So you've got that area, only 40 to 50% of it maybe is being used for housing. Prices continue to go up. So international money, restricted land supply, policy restricted land supply, and an incredible quality of life.
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful place, mild climate, safe, stable government, reliable banking system. So on a global scale, this is a really special place to be.
Yeah, pretty attractive option. And I think that's similarly what Cayman has going for it. I mean, yes, very finite resource in terms of land, being a tiny island. But then people will relocate here for infinitely better work-life balance, obviously lower taxation, and I think safety, education, healthcare. They are the three paramount that are increasingly more sought after in today's society.
Nobody has ever moved to Vancouver or Canada, for that matter, for lower taxation.
Well, yeah, and we'll come on to that later. One thing I wanted to chat about was the foreign buyer restriction in Canada. How did that impact the markets?
Yeah, so there's a bit of a backstory to this. British Columbia is probably the most heavily regulated real estate jurisdiction in North America. Certainly from my experience, and I've had the opportunity to work and train realtors all across the globe. So what's happened as house prices have gone up, renters have become frustrated. Rent prices are very high. We have rent controls, but as soon as you move, it gets very expensive to rent. So there was a bubbling unrest in the population. So the government started regulating the real estate industry, including the behaviors of realtors, as well as the taxation of real estate. They brought in a foreign buyer tax in British Columbia, specifically in the metro area of Vancouver. And that number, I forget what it was the first time. I think it might have started at 5% or 15. No, I think it started at 15%. So you have a transfer tax when you buy a property, and it's roughly 2%. It scales up as you kind of get over $2 million, but we'll call it 2% for the purposes of this analogy. So you buy a home for $1 million, you have a 2% transfer tax. If you're a foreigner, you would then had a 15% tax on that. That on top of the two.
Wow.
Then the 15 got increased to 20. And then Toronto, Ontario, on the other side of the country, introduced a similar tax at a similar amount, structured slightly differently, but same effect. So you had foreigners coming in buying homes. Keep in mind, our average house price in Vancouver on the west side of town is over $3 million. So you had a 20% tax plus the 2% tax, which scaled up to as much as 5%. So call it a 25% tax.
Wow.
If you were a foreigner buying a home. Now, the theory was, well, this will get all the foreign money out, but the money is already here. It was foreign buyers were only 4 to 6% of the market. It wasn't a huge swath of the market. This was people who were already here who had money. So that 25% tax took that 6% number, and then COVID hit, and it went down to I think it was 1.5% to 2% is what they were reporting.
Right.
And then the federal government, so those were provincial policies. The federal government came out with a policy of banning foreign buyers in a federal election campaign. Like, we're just going to ban foreign buyers.
Yeah, I saw that.
And it was a temporary foreign buyer ban. And both major political parties, conservative and liberal, had this policy in their platform, knowing that it wouldn't do anything, but it sounded really good.
Oh, I see.
And it worked in urban areas to attract votes. So the federal Liberal government followed through on the policy and brought in a temporary 2-year ban on foreign buyers. But it's only in census metropolitan areas or census I think it's census agglomerated areas. There's another acronym for this, which is basically towns of more than I think 15,000 people.
Okay.
So you're either in a metro area you foreigners can't buy, like full stop. You can't hide it in a corporation. You can't be the shareholder of a corporation. It's a full rule. And realtors are subject to tens of thousands of dollars of fines if we're found out to even be
Complicate it.
unwittingly cooperating with someone trying to do this.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
full foreign buyer ban. But you can go in adjacent areas like Whistler, which is consistently voted the #1 ski resort in North America. A foreigner can still buy in Whistler. So it's a bit of a misnomer that foreigners can't buy in Canada. They just can't buy in the major urban centers.
And because they're trying to make it or keep it more affordable for local buyers.
Theoretically, it's not actually.
But
having
you're saying
any-
it's had absolutely zero impact.
Yeah, again, the number was 6%. With the tax, it had gone down to 1 to 2%. Like, look at this. We literally shut our borders as a country for longer and harsher than most countries did.
Yeah,
in the world.
you guys had a
Canada
hard time.
We had some significant COVID restrictions. Like we were not allowed to travel between health jurisdictions inside of our own country for a while. Like in urban areas, you couldn't travel from. I couldn't go 50 kilometers away.
Yeah.
So we had really big travel restrictions. So even with that, and the foreign buyer tax of 20, call it 25%, and then a foreign buyer ban, our prices still went up. I think we should probably realize this was not the problem.
Yeah. That is fascinating.
The problem is supply.
Yeah.
In that we're not building enough supply and demand. Canada has somewhere, depending on how you read the numbers, somewhere between 400,000 and 600,000 immigrants a year into a country of 40 million people.
Yeah. That is crazy. So the stamp duty here, and again, that's why I think the foreign buyers find it very attractive here. There's a one-time stamp duty tax of 7.5%, irrespective of price point, whether you're a local or an expat or a foreign overseas buyer. 7.5%, which when you can kind of consider that based on Vancouver markets and rest of the Caribbean islands, other big major cities, is actually very affordable. Yeah, which makes it far more attractive. And you've also got no annual property taxes. There's no inheritance tax. There's no annual property tax. And so you pay that 7.5%. You've got no other holding costs for the property, which is
very hold on. This is
go
on. You have no property taxes?
Zero property tax. Well, you pay that one-time stamp duty on purchase, and then you don't pay anything else if you're a resident on the islands.
Okay, so do foreigners pay a property tax?
Not locally, but it'll get encompassed under your worldwide income, and so you may pay income tax back home if you're earning income from it.
But the actual property itself,
the property,
has no taxation.
yeah, there's no taxation, no, zero.
Oh wow! So Canada, I don't know of a jurisdiction in Canada that has a different rate for locals or foreigners.
Okay.
In British Columbia, we have a homeowner grant. So you get, depending on your age and the value, if your home's under a certain threshold, which I think is like $1.8 million this year, you get a grant from the provincial government to pay your local government of somewhere between $600 and $1,200, depending on your age and your disability or whatever. So we subsidize property taxes at the provincial level to the municipal level for principal residents only, which is a very nominal amount in the grand scheme of things. But in lots of jurisdictions in America, you have local longtime residents who have never moved paying extremely low taxes, like hundreds of dollars a year, and foreigners or non-residents of the state or foreigners paying exorbitantly high taxes, like the difference between like $1,000 and $6,000 a year in taxes on particular properties.
Yeah.
So Canada's kind of in the middle. America's at one end of the extreme, and Cayman's clearly at the other end with no property taxes.
Yeah, and that's it. And so in terms of taxation as a whole, we get a lot of Canadians coming to Cayman across all, income levels, but certainly at the high net worth and ultra high net worth level, relocating because, I think by and large people are happy paying taxes, but it seems as though in recent years, it's just come to a precipice whereby they're just had enough. And so the people Canadians that we see down here have had enough of paying the high taxation, and so relocating offshore. And also the world is getting infinitely smaller by the year. And so we're seeing an increasing amount of Canadians relocating here in order to mitigate their tax on that. I've got a little stat here that actually said the top 20% of earners in Canada paid 64% of the total income tax in Canada, yet only accounted for 49% of the country's total income. So there's a 14% swing there. And I think from what I'm seeing and the conversation that I'm having with the Canadians that move down here is that it's just if it's fair, they're happy paying that. But it just seems as though people are being pressed a little bit too hard. I don't know your perspective on that.
Yeah, so Canadian small business taxes are actually very reasonable,
Okay.
like 11 to 13% inside of a small business corporation. Personal income taxes are quite high for high income earners, with marginal tax rates north of 50%. I think the highest province, because you have a federal tax rate and then you have a provincial tax rate. I think the highest taxed province is somewhere in the neighborhood of 52% on the margins.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're over, I don't know what that number is, call it 250,000, you could be at 52% of all your subsequent income being taxed away.
Mm-hmm.
Now, again, small business taxes are very competitive. If you're running a small business making less than 500,000 a year, paying yourself a salary of 150, 200,000, and then your business has an additional 4 or 500,000 it's generated, that business is only paying 11 to 12% tax. So very, very reasonable, competitive with America, which is obviously our primary competitor. But then we also have sales tax and carbon tax and provincial sales tax and federal sales tax and carbon tax. Like there's just so many other things that come into play. Like in British Columbia, you pay an additional, I think it's 15%. Yes, I think we have an 8% provincial tax and a 7% federal, 7% federal tax. Plus, with gasoline, there's like a local transit tax and there's a carbon tax, and then the GST is on top of the carbon.
It all sounds it sounds a lot.
But all I know is that I now pay somewhere in the neighborhood of $2 to $2.25 a liter for gasoline, and I'm in a country that has gasoline
that produces, yeah.
Like it's just outrageous. And I get it. Gas should be expensive on a small island in the middle of the Caribbean. Gas should not be expensive when I have friends who literally are the guys who pull it out of the ground.
Yeah. No, very true. I was reading something the other day, and it said everyone's up in arms about the cost of gas these days, but are quite happy to pay that is dug from the depth of the sea or wherever it comes from, and yet the price of beer, which is infinitely more on a volume basis, which is just a couple of grains mixed with some water and then bottled, they're quite happy to pay whatever the cost is for that. But when it comes to gasoline actually, when you think about it, seems good value, but that's a side note.
Yeah, I'm generally okay with it. It's just here, I'm not paying that because the market's gone up. I'm paying that because I literally pay tax on gasoline tax.
Yeah. And I think that's it. The world is, waking up, and people are happy paying their taxes. Well, nobody's happy paying taxes, but it is what it is. But it feels as though people are really being squeezed, and with inflation and high interest rates, people are just realizing I don't have to do this anymore. I can, as I said, the world is getting smaller. I can work remotely. I can move anywhere in the world. Why won't I go and live somewhere like the Cayman Islands, and pay 0% income tax, and have a potentially better quality of life?
Yeah. Also notable, the difference between two things on taxes between Canada and the States. The first is we have national public health care, and America's never figured that out. I think it's crazy that a nation as developed as America hasn't figured out a comprehensive healthcare system. And I don't think Canada's healthcare system is well organized. It's really stressed and at a breaking point. But we do have high taxes, but that is reflected in some of the larger services we get. Cancer, heart operations, those are all really well taken care of. The other notable tax difference between Canada and the United States, which is obviously your two primary markets, I would think, are Canada and the United States for people moving down, if not the UK. In America, you are, as an American citizen, you're taxed on worldwide income, regardless of where you like to maintain citizenship. You're taxed on worldwide income. In Canada, we don't do that. You're only taxed on your Canadian income. Um, if you're a Canadian resident, you're taxed on worldwide income, but we have tax treaties with different countries. But if I'm a Canadian and I move to Cayman and I maintain Canadian businesses, my Canadian tax filing is only subject to my Canadian income because I don't have residency in Canada anymore. So for a Canadian looking to avoid taxes on worldwide income, Cayman is a very attractive place to go because you can still maintain your Canadian citizenship without residency. And the Canadian passport is very valuable, right?
Yeah.
I can get anywhere, I can do anything, and it comes with a parachute of healthcare. If I were to leave, I can just come back into Canada, access a national public healthcare system if I find myself in a catastrophic situation. So I have had clients who have done this, and it's sad to see them leave for tax reasons, but everybody has a breaking point.
Yeah, and I think that's it. And yes, to your point, I think that's why Cayman is attractive for Canadians. One, English speaking. Two, and less so for the West Coast, but certainly we do get a lot of people from the West Coast here. But Toronto is a 5 hour flight. There's zero change in time zone, and yeah, you don't get taxed. Or you still don't have to, pay tax back home once you're a resident here in the Cayman Islands. If you've cut ties in terms of you've sold any assets or properties back home in Canada. So yeah, I think we've got a lot of Canadians down here, and I have to say I love Canadians. You guys are a friendly bunch, and also like the snow is a real issue. Like the Canadians down here, they're like, I just could not do another winter in Canada. Like I think when you're younger, you're fine and you just do it. But when you get to I think a certain age and you've done so many winters, you're like, that's it, I'm out. And it's the same with the taxes, I think.
Yeah, it's the weather in Canada. I often describe it this way. Canadian weather is 9 months of expectation and 3 months of disappointment.
Well, yeah. Well, whereas actually in England, it's just if you get 2 to 4 good weeks in the summer, you're happy. And it's just aside from that, it's grey.
But in England, it's never really bad, but it's never really
No,
good.
yeah, that's true. And you understand it is what it is, and you just get on with it.
In Vancouver in particular, it's like it's not horrific, but it's like really bad in the winter. It'll rain for 90, 100 days in a row. We're a very northern country, so the sun will come up at kind of like 8 o'clock. It'll start getting dark around 3:30. People don't really think of Canada the way that Norway and Sweden have those clear delineations, but we're just close enough where it's like it's like a little dark in the morning and a little dark a little earlier in the afternoon, and it's drizzly and cold. And then summer comes along, and the sunset this week, we're recording this at the end of June, summer solstice. The sun's setting at like 9:45. It's still light out at 10 o'clock. We're sitting on a patio, and you get these incredibly long, beautiful days, like long, hot summer days that run for 14, 16 hours. And you're on the boat, you're in the ocean, you see the mountains, and it's wonderful. And that's what you think of when you think of Vancouver.
Yeah.
But that's a fleeting 4 to 6 week period, followed by some shoulder. Lately, we've had forest fires, which have been caused challenges, and then we just have like 6 months of rain. But we live in a rainforest, so we have to we just have to put on the slicker and go
and just get on with it. I guess it creates a lot of mental resilience.
It creates a lot of desire to go and travel and get away to places like Cayman and Hawaii and Mexico and Arizona and Palm Springs. Like all of our flights in the winter are just south.
Yes.
South.
Yeah.
The Canadian snowbird term is very realistic.
Oh, for sure. And we see them down here all the time, obviously. So with that in mind, obviously the world is getting smaller. People are able to work remotely. Do you see kind of a growing trend of people sort of leaving Canada and having various different domiciles? Are there any clients that you have that, maybe selling for that reason?
Well, what's happened in Vancouver? So in addition to the foreign buyer ban and the foreign buyer tax, Vancouver also implemented a vacancy tax So this is specific to the city of Vancouver, and the Metro Vancouver area is made up of a number of municipalities: West Vancouver, North Vancouver, Richmond, Burnaby, on and on and on. But the city of Vancouver implemented a empty homes tax. So if you own a home or a condo in Vancouver and you are not living in it as your principal residence and paying taxes as if that is your principal residence, so paying provincial and federal taxes from that address, you have a 5% annual property tax based on the assessed value of your home.
Oof.
Again, the average price of a home is $3 million. So you get into one of these downtown condos for $5 million, which is not an unreasonable number for a fancy downtown condo. You're paying $25,000 a year in taxes
Just to hold it.
Yeah. So sorry, 250,000.
So I was going to say 250. Yeah.
In my head, I was looking and I missed the zero. So you're paying $250,000 a year in taxes just to hold this condo. So people are like, you know what? For $250,000 a year, I can just stay at a nice hotel.
Yeah, I'll check into a hotel next time I'm in town.
And so we've seen some of those luxury condos get sold, and we have a lot of there's a lot of like Arab. There's a couple Arab princes. There's a couple stars. Some NHL owners have had condos in the $25 million range. And they're just like, yeah, you know what? Vancouver's just not one of those cities we want to be part of anymore. It's too, there's too much tax. It's too negative as a place to come and for part of my year and spend money there. The problem is, and then on top of that, the provincial government came up with a separate tax of a similar amount called the speculation and vacancy tax. They called it a speculation tax because it sounds good. It's not about speculating. It's about people who own second homes. So it's a second homes tax. If you have a second home in British Columbia, you're taxed on it at the provincial level, not in all jurisdictions. And there's, but for the most part. So if you are an international person, you have global capital, and you're like, hey, Vancouver's a beautiful place. It's a place I want to maintain some amount of connection to. I want to have money invested there. I want to spend time there. You can't without hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of taxes. And so people are like, yeah, we're going to leave. This doesn't solve the housing problem because the $25 million condo that Daryl Cates, the owner of Rexall Pharmacy and the owner of the Edmonton Oilers, he used to own this condo. So he sells this thing, he leaves. Someone else buys a $25 million condo. That doesn't make housing more affordable for people. It just means that Daryl doesn't come to town and spend a couple $1,000 at a restaurant and, take his friends out and entertain global icons. Like, it prevents a lot of money from just coming into the economy from an entertainment standpoint.
Yeah.
And that I think that's unfortunate. Certainly at the ultra high net worth level, it's taxing them away. Just you're taxing away all of their spending as well.
Yeah.
They used to go to the stores. They bought their Fendis here. They bought their I don't know what the fancy Birkins. There you go. They bought their Birkin bags here.
So Cayman kind of on the opposite spectrum of that. So previously, people that would do business down here and have trusts incorporated here and whatever else and family offices. Now, a lot of those individuals, because the world is getting smaller and remote work is a lot more commonplace, and also I think just people are wanting a better work-life balance, those families are moving their entire families and extended families here, which then creates the spending here on the island, which has a huge trickle-down effect. So it starts at the corporation structure level and then trickles down to the real estate, and then kind of there's a whole range of spending from that, which is phenomenal, and one of the reasons why the island is doing incredibly well.
Do you have the schooling to support those families?
Yeah, really good question. So historically, no, but now we've got it was probably about 10 years, maybe 12 years ago, a phenomenal international school that opened up, and there's a couple, actually probably 3 world-class schools in the process of opening up. And so, yes, and I heard there's going to be the first boarding school on the island, which is affiliated with a fantastic British boarding school. And so you'll find that other individuals, around the Caribbean or wherever, can come board, get a world-class education, and then those of individuals, the parents may well move here from other Caribbean islands. So yes, the education is it's good, but it's about to be world class.
And maybe this is me being naive about how the world works, but I have a sense that parents these days are different than previous generations. Like the desire to send kids away to boarding school has kind of gone away. Even the ones I know that are at boarding school, their parents are close.
Mm,
Like they're not being sent away internationally the way it kind of used to happen. Um, I just feel like our generation, I have a 3-year old, you have a 8-month old.
mm.
Our generation, like we're not going to send our kids away to boarding school. We want them to have good education, but we want to be close to that education with them.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. So if I take my wife as an example and that generation, 30 years ago, local education here wasn't, phenomenal. And the rite of passage would be boarding school in the UK, US, or Canada. And that is definitely changing now with the better education on island and also just yeah, the world's a different place. You don't want to be sending little Jimmy off on a plane and, at, I don't know, 10, 12 years old and immersed in a school of strangers. So I hold a lot of bias towards boarding school because I went to boarding school, but like you said, it was half an hour down the road from home. So during the week, I would be at school and be surrounded by my friends, and then on the weekend head home, which was the best of both worlds. And I loved that model. I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah, I can see that. I can't yet imagine being away from my son for
Mm,
that regular amount of time, but he's still, new enough that it's exciting.
yes, yeah,
But certainly he's not going anywhere where I would have to get on a plane to go and get him at school.
yeah. And I guess that's one of the taxes that you pay here in the Cayman Islands is, we are still a very remote island and some stuff is inconvenient. And yeah, I guess schooling is one of them. But as I say, a lot of the people that live here are acutely aware of this, and so the island is rapidly changing.
Now, what about healthcare on the island and
Mm,
the costs associated therewith?
yeah, so phenomenal healthcare. It's expensive though. So there's no income tax here, but you do pay exorbitant amounts of health insurance because there's no public health. So, but
Are those private insurers Cayman based, or are you buying from a global insurer?
a bit of both, but mainly I think they're all trending towards global. I think a lot of the smaller ones have closed down now, or they'll be within the Caribbean, so lumped in with a few of the other islands.
And is there anything I can't get done on the island? Like, can I go through full cancer treatments and heart surgeries and
Yeah,
the big ones?
heart surgeries, yes, no problem. There's a phenomenal new facility that's opened in the East End district of the island, which caters towards healthcare tourism as well. So with the cost
Okay.
of um, let's say heart surgery in the US, you can come down here, get it done cheaper, bring the family and have a bit of a holiday, make it, a holiday vacation, and then go back home. The cancer stuff,
It's probably easier to recover from heart surgery there than it is in Grand Rapids, Michigan in
yeah,
the winter.
exactly. There you go. And if you can save a bit of money doing it, then yeah,
Yeah.
happy days.
With all due respect to my friends in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Yeah. With the greatest respect. And then the cancer stuff, if it's something more significant, then a lot of people will head off island just to get the best. When it comes to healthcare, you don't want to mess around. So if you're really looking for the best, and if it's a very rare sort of form of disease that you have, then a lot of people will head off island. So, but again, it's one of the prices you pay for living in paradise, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, Talk to me. So you own two vacation homes. So one in Hawaii, which is sort of we initially bounced a few DMs back and forth on, and then one in Whistler where you currently are. What is
Yeah.
how do you find that? What are the best things and the worst things about owning vacation homes?
Well, right off the bat, it's not it's just another home I own
Yeah,
that
okay.
I like to think I go on vacation at, but when I get there, I just have to do all the work that is required of a home.
Yes.
Hawaii was a long, long time dream of mine. I fell in love with Hawaii. Uh, the first time I went, I was a young kid, but I really fell in love with it in university. I went to university in graduate school in Nova Scotia, and it was kind of year five of university, and I had enough points ratcheted up over 5 years that we flew from Nova Scotia all the way to Hawaii.
Wow.
So across all of Canada on a 7 hour flight, and then over to Hawaii on a 6 hour flight. And I was thinking to myself, this place is unbelievable. Hawaii is the perfect climate, right? It's just like 80 degrees every day. A little bit warmer, a little bit cooler. You can wear shorts or pants. You can wear a sweater or a shirt. Like it's just like the perfect climate. And nothing there wants to kill you. Whereas like Australia, everything wants to kill you, right? The climate, the people, the bugs,
Yeah, that's true.
Australia is just like out to get you.
Yeah.
Hawaii doesn't. It just doesn't want to kill you. There's sharks in the water, but just don't go more than like 40 feet out. You'll be fine. So I just loved Hawaii. Always wanted a place there. I was able to make that come true in 2018. We bought that home. So we use that. We've typically used it at Christmas for the last number of years, and have otherwise had it available as a rental, either to friends and family or through Airbnb. Now, as a Canadian, we have a tax treaty with America, so I file U.S. income taxes. If I have tax owing, that I pay the higher of whatever country has the higher rate. So let's say if I run those taxes and I owe $20,000 of taxes in America and $30,000 in Canada, I pay $20,000 in America and then $10,000 to Canada.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, if I have 20,000 owing in Canada and 30,000 in America, I pay 30,000 to America and I file it as a credit on my Canadian taxes, and I have no taxes owing in Canada.
Yeah. Okay.
So Canada, US works because there's no double taxation.
Yeah. Okay.
Whereas other jurisdictions, I would have double taxation.
Yeah. Okay.
From rental income.
Yes.
Because again, I'm paying tax on worldwide income in Canada because this is where I live. So
Yeah.
that's a reasonable position for the government to take. Whereas if I were living in America, I would pay worldwide. If I was an American citizen, I would pay taxes on worldwide income regardless of whether or not I lived in America.
Yeah.
America's got a very punitive system that way. And I'm sure you see a lot of Americans renouncing their citizenship in favor of Cayman citizenship for that exact reason, because U.S. taxes are so complicated.
Yeah, we do, and it's a tough thing to do, to renounce your citizenship like that. Yeah. That's a real big step, and particularly for Americans who are very proud. But again, it goes back to people are okay being pushed, but there's a certain tipping point, and I just feel as though maybe post-COVID and what I'm exposed to here, just more and more Canadians, but certainly Americans coming here and making those decisions to renounce citizenship.
Yeah. I don't see a circumstance where I would ever renounce Canadian citizenship. No. It's like, I'm a patriot. Canada's the best.
Yeah.
But I can see why particular Americans would choose to renounce citizenship, just purely for the cost of being American.
Mm-hmm.
in the ultra high net worth space, or even the high net worth space, is really expensive.
Yeah.
So look, Hawaii is great. Owning a vacation home is lovely. It's kind of a place we can always go with a young child. That works out well because he has a crib, he has a routine, he has a toddler bed. Everything that we need for him remains there. So traveling has been easy for these first couple of years of his life. We'd like to go somewhere else and do something else, but it's just so complicated.
Yeah.
Whereas Hawaii is easy for us. It's a direct flight from Vancouver to the island that we're on. Our home has room for guests. My mom comes with us. She helps us look after him. Like, it's a wonderful experience. Now, that said, I spent part of my vacation rebuilding a barbecue last year. So because, as you would know, living in a salt air climate, the barbecue has to get rebuilt or thrown out every 2 years because it just gets destroyed.
Yeah.
So it changes your calculus on what a vacation is. look, and no one's life is as good as it appears on Instagram,
Yeah.
and Hawaii lends itself to that Instagram lifestyle. But in the winter, when Canada is cold and rainy and dark, it's nice to get away and get some vitamin D.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the things that so I think a lot of people are on this passive income sort of movement, and vacation home ownership is very much a part of that. But there is a real cost associated with owning a vacation home, and yes, it's exactly that. There's you building a barbecue, or just realizing there's a lot to do, and we that own a vacation rental in a even smaller Caribbean island, Little Cayman, you have to put stuff on a barge, supplies, ship it across every few months. So that is quite tiring. But one of the best things is reading the guest book when we get there and just seeing what a phenomenal time everyone has had is really nice to be able to open your home to individuals and for them to really create memories. It sounds really soft, but yeah, I love that about vacation ownership.
Yeah, I for me it was just the rely like I don't have to think about where I'm going in
Yeah,
December. I'm
yeah,
going to Hawaii, I'm going to my home, I'm going to, my clothes are in a bin.
yeah,
I pulled them out. I've had this, I've had the same clothes there for 5 years because I only wear the clothes like 60 days a year.
yeah. Okay.
So the t-shirt has like a 10-year lifespan because it's
Right.
only
Yeah,
a 2-year t-shirt.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so for us, that's been easy. And then Whistler, this is a different scenario. We had the opportunity in COVID, when everything kind of went remote, to kind of shift how we work and live. Um, Even in real estate, the physical presence started to matter a lot less as we went to Matterport tours and DocuSign and all the other things that, in Cayman, you could get away with it a little more because you were always a remote location where people would just come in. They'd have made a decision before they arrived. They were just coming to confirm their suspicion on the purchase.
Mhm.
So the rest of the world basically became a remote island in the middle, from a real estate perspective, in the middle of COVID. And we actually moved our families. Our principal home has been in Whistler for the last number of years, which is again, voted number one ski resort in North America year after year after year. It's about an hour and 30 to 1.5 to 2 hours drive from Vancouver, on one of the top 10 drives in the world,
I can only
literally
imagine.
top five in North America. It's called the Sea to Sky Highway. It's this winding highway that skirts the ocean and then heads up into the mountain to this beautiful resort with 5 swimmable lakes in the summer and mountain biking and skiing. And like, if I could take this camera and walk you outside right now, like your mind would be blown about the beauty of this place.
Yeah, I bet.
Um, and with our son, he rides his bike on the trails, and we hike in the forest. And yesterday we went over to some friend's house for dinner, and they had been on their boat earlier. Their boat's a half an hour away, so for dinner we had crab and halibut that they had plucked from the ocean in the day before.
Mm.
And we sat on this patio, and then on our way home we saw a bear walking down the road. Like it was like a parody of Canada.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So Whistler's an unbelievable place, and we're very grateful to have our time here. And then I still work in the city, and
Yeah.
my wife works remotely, so um, we've just been able to get away with it.
Yeah, and so I know you're very much big on your work-life balance, and I guess this is very much part of that. Was there a tipping point that sort of moved you in that direction?
Yeah, I can take you back to summer of 2018. We were at a real estate conference. My wife also, she works remotely in the real estate space as well, and we were going to a live conference in Vancouver. It was day 3 of the conference. We'd been through the first 2 days. We'd gone out for the big dinners after the conference, right? Like lots of nice steak dinners. And I'd go home at like 8:30, 9 o'clock, and I'd put another deal I did 2 deals the night before this, really working hard, no children. And so it was the Friday morning going to day 3 of the conference. I was in the shower and I couldn't breathe. And I was like struggling to catch my breath. And I called for Stephanie. I said, "We can't go to the conference today." She said, "Why not?" I said, "I think I'm having a heart attack."
Oh, jeez.
And at this point, my arm starts to hurt. And I don't know if I'm thinking this or if it's real. And I can't catch my breath. And I'm not even hyperventilating. I just can't get air in or out. And so I really quickly get dressed and we drive to the hospital. And again, public healthcare works reasonably well in like really emergent situations. Going to the hospital, why are you here? I think I'm having a heart attack. Right this way, Mr. Roy. And they take me in and they run the battery of tests and they determine that I'm having a panic attack combined with an acid reflux attack. Welcome to your 40s.
I was going to say, welcome to midlife. Yeah.
It's a right, like I'm in my late 30s at this point, and I was having a panic attack for no particular reason. It was just and when I look back on it in the 6 months leading up to that, my phone would ring and my chest would get tight. Didn't matter who was calling me, whether it was a client wanting to sell a $5 million house or someone wanting to see a listing or another realtor calling because a listing wasn't clean when I sold it. My chest would get tight. And I didn't think of that really at the time because that overwhelm becomes normal. And so that, I didn't have a heart attack. I went home, I spent the day on the couch, watched Netflix, left my phone upstairs, just kind of chilled for the day. And we had already kind of had this in the works, but we then went on an 8-month sabbatical and I turned my phone off for 8 months. I forwarded my email to my assistant and I disappeared. And we bought an around the world plane ticket and we went Vancouver, Toronto, Reykjavik. We spent a month driving across Canada. We flew to Iceland. We spent a month in Iceland. We spent 6 weeks in Europe. And Amsterdam, I went to Stuttgart because I wanted to see the Porsche Museum. I went to Highclere Castle because I was a big Downton Abbey fan.
Okay.
All those things that don't justify a trip on their own, I did them all as one big trip. We flew from Frankfurt to Singapore, spent a better part of a week there, into Australia for 3 weeks, into New Zealand for 3 weeks. That was the year we had bought our home in Hawaii. So we finished the trip with a couple months in Hawaii. And I came back 8 months later, significantly better realtor.
Yeah.
And a better person.
I was going to say a better individual.
Yeah. And I just found that calm again. And I realized, from an industry standpoint, there's no such thing as a real estate emergency. And your client might think it's an emergency and you might convince yourself it is, but it's not true.
Yeah.
And this is applicable for any industry. There's no such thing as a stockbroker emergency.
Well, apart from heart surgeons.
Heart surgeons,
Yeah.
you're not a doctor.
Yeah.
That's what I tell because most people are not a doctor. Healthcare things are emergencies.
Yeah.
A flooding basement is not an emergency, unless life is at risk. It's important and it matters and we need to respond to it. But as a realtor, I was taking the attitude that, this is an emergency. The place is dirty. I can't clean it today. I'll get it cleaned tomorrow. I'll make it right. Right? I will do right by my clients. But that emergency aspect left my mind. And I'm much calmer. I enjoy life a lot more. I've been able to spend more time with our son as a result and with Stephanie. And I've found some free time, and I still work a lot.
Yeah.
But that chest pain has never come back.
And you have better systems and structures in place to avoid that happening again, I would imagine.
Yeah, from a business perspective, the biggest lesson I learned is, and I run a small team. I've got 3 licensed realtors and 3 assistants is kind of how it's structured. I realized that I was doing things that was subsidizing their work and not allowing them to do their job. And by me leaving, they actually, not only did they get better, but they improved some of the things that I had built. And I'd been holding them back from doing great things.
Interesting. So the time away just forces people to, growth. It's kind of forced growth and change. Yeah, no, I love that. And definitely something I'm super conscious about, which is why I asked the question, because, the industry can be, just perceived as a constant emergency. But I think COVID was very good for that. It kind of made you hit the pause button and reflect. And so I'm certainly putting practices into place to avoid the midlife sort of meltdown physically and mentally. Yeah.
And I don't like, look, work-life balance is a bit of a myth, particularly in this industry. I refer to it as work-life blend. You need to be able to blend the two things together. And it's wonderful and terrible at the same time. I can take business calls when I'm in Hawaii. I can take business calls when I'm in Whistler or when I'm in Vancouver. But when I go on a bike ride in Whistler, I'll often just leave my phone behind. And it's only an hour or two, but there's some freedom to that. And I'll blend it all together, but you have to remember to blend the not work with the work. Yeah. Otherwise, I always say that the realtor definition of a vacation is working from a location that's slightly warmer than the one in which you typically live.
Yeah.
Whereas in your case, a realtor vacation is working in a location that's slightly more English than the one in which you typically live.
Ideally, slightly cooler and yes, maybe slightly more English. Yeah. No, I love that. Yeah. Is there anything that you're sort of working on at the moment that is exciting you?
Well, I'll share with you. I'm contemplating. Well, I'm not contemplating. I'm going to do it. I'm going to make a run for federal parliament in Canada. You might have picked up that I'm pretty passionate about.
Yeah, for sure.
How difficult government is in Canada. Mm-hmm. I'm a lifelong conservative. We have a new-ish conservative leader in Canada. He's been around for about a year as the leader, and he's someone I knew back in university days. And in our federal district is this large district that encompasses a small part of West Vancouver, all the way up past Whistler. And I'm going to attempt to be the conservative member of parliament, which would be the equivalent of a congressman. Mm-hmm. It's our national parliament, and I'm going to run as the conservative candidate there, and hopefully be part of a majority government that gets rid of the high tax, high spends, virtue signaling government that we have now, and moves to a more reasonable, rational, patriotic government that just lets people live their lives.
Yeah, nice. Well, wishing you the best of luck and success with that. I mean, realtors in some regards are, politicians just trying to keep everybody happy all the time. So I think you'd be a very good fit for the role.
I've always said I've been doing the job for 17 years. Yeah. I knock on doors, I put signs in yards, and I represent people.
Yeah, exactly. No, you've got the perfect skill set for it.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Well, great.
And when that's all done and winter sets in, I'll come down to Cayman.
Honestly, please do. Would love to host you here. And yeah, it's I hold huge bias towards here. I think it's the best place in the world. And yeah, we're just trying to let people know that Cayman is here. It's an option. And yeah, come check us out.
Hey, for those same people, particularly the foreign buyers, Whistler in particular is an option. It's not part of the census area. It trades as a real estate asset like Vancouver. It's close to the urban center. It's an hour and a half away. It's all the benefits of Canada, and it's a high revenue market as well from a vacation rental standpoint. So if those people are looking to diversify between cold and hot,
right? Yeah, there you go.
North and south, and where wide open spaces and endless amounts of land. Canada's your place.
Nice.
Small, perfect beaches. Cayman's your place.
There we go. And where can people find you if they want to contact you?
I've always said this: if you Google Keith Roy and you can't find me, that's my fault.
Yeah. Okay. You've done something wrong there. Fair enough. All right, Keith. Thank you very much for chatting. Speak to you soon.
Right on. Thanks.